I'm Jamie, and as always, it's my pleasure to introduce Stefan. Stefan, how are you?
Hey Jamie, I'm doing well, thank you.
So, something that's been on my mind, and I think on the mind of a lot of entrepreneurs this week and this month, is community building, particularly around how it can be leveraged, and even more specifically, what the return on investment is. Because you see these community leaders putting in seemingly like endless effort into building a community, introducing new people into the community, developing the community, and you think it must be paying them in some form. So to open it up, what's the ORI on community building?
That's a good question, Jamie. And this is a topic that is near to my heart because basically, Titanology is in essence a community for business owners, and we are building that community. And the ROI of community can be huge. Now, I say can be because it's not because you have like a Facebook group or just an email list that you have a community, right? It's much more than that. And yeah, it can take a lot of time before your community is actually providing you the ROI that you want. But if you have a community, then some studies say that the ROI of a community can be in more than 1,000% of an ROI. And that's because of several reasons.
I mean, there are big network effects, right?
Yeah,
Like,
100%. Like you're actually building a huge fan base. People that actually want to be in that community, that actually want to be connected to what you do. If it's a product or a service or whatever you do, if people want to be connected with other people that are using your services, your product, that's huge because that also means that they don't want to leave. If they need something that you can provide, they will always come back to you. That's why it's such a great tool and a great ROI because you don't need to do that much effort anymore. Once you have it built, once it's running smoothly and a lot of people are in there and talking to each other and talking to you, the time that you need to invest to create new sales is a lot less.
the interesting thing too is that it's like this critical mass, right? Once the community becomes something that runs itself and just the numbers and engagement produce a benefit for the members, if you run it, you then go, shit, this is quite a good gig. I mean, there's two variables really, right? There's the number of people, but then there's also the engagement. When you're talking about the ORI on communities, what does the percentage of importance look like for each?
Mm. This is something that is not easy to answer because it's different for any community. I would say, like you can have 5 people within your community, which is already giving you an ROI that is positive. Now, in terms of engagement, in the beginning, it's all about starting conversations. That's what it's all about. And the only person that can really do that at the beginning is you as a business owner. And yes, it's an extra task that you need to do on a regular basis. But there's no way around it, right? If you have enough revenue coming in, then you can maybe hire a community manager that can do it for you. But then at the starting point, no, you have to do it yourself. And creating those conversations, starting those conversations, and then really engaging, or you yourself proactively engaging with your community managers, community members, even if it's 5 people, then they start replying on the conversations. And once they start replying, that's where you generate some traction, right? And you have to keep doing that. And once they create their own conversations or their own questions and they answer the answers coming from the people that are within the community, that's when it really starts developing into a sense of a community. How long that will take, it's really hard to answer that. It's not linear, right? It's something that has to develop over time, and suddenly it's like a spark, and people start using the community for their own gain and engage with other people, and that's where it really takes off. And then the only thing that you need to do then is making sure that there is value to be shared again and again and again, so people have something to interact with, right? And that's where it happens.
Yeah, I mean, this is the irony of the overnight success that took 5 years.
Yeah, that's with everything, right? It's so funny to see people wondering like, how did they create this? Like, oh, this community is great. Oh, this kind of return on investment is great. I want it. I want it as well. I want it now. But they forget that they have been working on it for 3 or 4 years, right? A community doesn't really pop out of the ground immediately. You have to put in the work, just with everything. Now, I think like people might wonder like, is it really worth it to spend that kind of time and energy in the beginning? I would say it's a chicken and the egg problem. Like, if you don't have a community at a certain point, you will not be able to reap the benefits of a community. And if you want to have an easier business going, you need to create that community. So putting in the time in the beginning just makes sense. As much as it makes sense to create marketing or any other type of content for your business, it makes sense to put time aside to build a community. And just like with content marketing, it just takes time. It takes time, but if it suddenly takes off, well, I mean, then all the work that you have done really has a huge benefit for the business.
With the community, how important is it to be strict in defining the tone of the community, what people do on it? Because I can see two arguments here. On the one side, you want to let the thing breathe and develop organically, but on the other hand, you want it to be a specific thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really important to show people why they should be in the community and who is it for, right? If they don't feel it's for them, they will not join. And again, it's the same as with like niching down. At the beginning, you think, okay, I just need to serve everybody, right? Because then that will generate the most sales. No, because people will not relate to what you're doing. And the same way, you have to build your community. Make sure that it is really clear for who it is and what they can get out of it. Why would they want to join your community in the first place? If the answer to that question is, well, I don't know, then they will not join, right? If they don't see the value of joining your community, then they will not join, right? That is the first problem or the first question you need to answer for yourself. If I create this community for my business, because it's for your business, right? It's not just a community that you want to create, it's to create an ROI for your business. Why are you creating the community? Who is it for, and what value will they get out of it, right? Answer those questions, and then you will have something to show to people. And with anything that we have done before in the previous podcasts as well, what we said is test these kind of answers to your audience, to the people that you already know, that you are connected with. Just say to them, ask them like, hey, I got this new community and this is about this and that, and it's for these kind of people. What do you think? Do you think this would be valuable to you? And if not, well, what would make it valuable to you, right? Create that feedback loop from the people that you already know so you can improve that and get people in there as soon as possible. And then start conversations, start those kind of topics that they want, and see how it evolves. It's what I need to do with Titanology as well. I need to continually question if this community is something that people want, right? What creates that kind of sense of urgency that they want to be in there? And if they're in there, then the next question is, how will they start engaging? You know?
Let's just take it there for a second. How do you, as a moderator of a community, as a business person, begin to cultivate actions in the community that make it worthwhile being there?
That's a good question, Jamie. I think there are two things that are really important. First of all, is asking questions. Asking questions, engaging questions that people find easy to answer because they want to show other people what they're doing, what they're working on, and so on. So asking questions, open-ended questions that people love to answer. Those viral questions, let's say,
Mm.
those are important to start at least some kind of conversation, right? And then the next thing is content. Because, like with anything that we do within business, if we create content that creates engagement, that's where it all starts. And within a community, it's the same thing. Create the content that people want to get, want to consume, but make it so um, that it's not available anywhere else. You know, if you're just repurposing content that is available on social media or on your site or whatever, then what is the incentive for them to read that content or to get that content in your community? So make sure that they realize that, well, if I'm in this community, I will get content, I will get value that I will get nowhere else.
Right, so there's an exclusivity factor here playing in.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
the idea is if, and let's just pick up on that for a moment. Let's talk about the interactions between members. What's the ideal interaction? Is there somewhere where members can sell to each other? Is this where partnerships form? Like, what's the high level purpose of joining if I'm Mr. or Mrs. Perspective?
Yeah, within Titanology, this is all about trying to help each other out, right? I think the best communities are the communities where people can help each other out. That's why like Reddit is so hugely popular because
Mm.
or Quora, you can ask questions and people answer those questions. And that's a huge value for a lot of people because you get perspectives from a lot of people, not just from the one coach or the one business owner that you're related with, but you get answers from different people from different areas of business. And that together, all those answers together, will give you much more value. So if you can create those kind of interactions within your community, then that will keep people from coming, like that will keep getting people coming back to the community because they want to know, okay, is there another answer or can I know something more from another person in the community? Like, make it sure that you have that kind of sense of communications, interactions going. Not just this, like, don't make it just like how do you say that? Don't make it like a board or a forum or like, how do I say that? Don't just make it like a directory where people just post anything around their offers or something like that, right? That doesn't work. It's not a directory. It's not a business directory. It's not a place where you can try to sell whatever you have. It's a place of interaction. That's why it's called a community. A community is where interactions happen with people that create value for the people that are in the community.
So, right, and this it's an important message here because if you're going to invest your time in creating a community and you're hoping to at some point reap an ORI, the community has to strike the right tone. If it doesn't strike
Mm.
the right tone and it turns into a business directory, it becomes immediately less interesting to interact with.
Yeah, and it's what I see online last couple of weeks. Like, there are several LGBTQ plus business groups, for example, on Facebook. But most of these groups are all about, hey, look at me, look at my product, look at my site, look at this, look at that. But what we want to do within Titanology, within our group, for instance, is give practical advice, give value that they can actually implement within their business. That's one. And on top of that, also trying to create those engagements, create those questions that people can share their experiences. Other groups are much more focused on, hey, look at me, and oh yeah, this is so awesome, and not so much like, okay, sharing struggles and getting answers how to solve those struggles, for example. And that's a big difference I feel between a community that provides value and a community that is just there to showcase each other's projects. And 100% sure that the one that provides value will eventually create much more interaction, create much more of an ROI for us as Titanology, but also for the people that are in there. Because imagine this, if your community, if people that are in your community generates an ROI for them, not
Mm.
just for you, but for them in a way that they can apply some of the pieces of information, the knowledge, the guidance within their own business, within their own life, how hugely valuable is that, right?
What's the so when we talk about ORI for the person running the community, what form does that take? Like, what are the various forms of ORI?
For the business itself or for the people that are in there?
No, for the business, for the business itself, the person running the community.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, and I've written down some notes here. I think the three main things that I see as an ROI for community building is, first of all, like, you will have your own set of raving fans that is connected to whatever you're doing, right?
Sure.
So people that are in your community, the know like trust factor is already there. So they will be much more inclined to buy something that you are offering because they're already part of the community. They like to be in there. So whatever you throw at them, in a way, they will want to at least look at it and possibly buy more of it. So increased revenue, in a sense. That's definitely a huge part of this because more people will see what you're doing, more people will buy, and also more people will buy again. So the lifetime value of customers increases a lot if you're building a good community. So increased revenue, increased lifetime value, and also a decrease in cost of customer acquisition. If you want new customers, you have to do social media, content marketing, email marketing, whatever, paid ads. It takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money. So the cost of acquiring a new customer can get into the hundreds of dollars, right? If you build that community, the cost of acquiring a customer through your community is almost none because you don't really need to do extra things to acquire new customers because the people that are in the community, again, the amount of work that you need to do to convince people to buy your product is so much less than somebody that is out there that is a complete stranger to your business. So get them into your community first so they can get to know you and then sell your products, your services to them. That will
And
be
what's the
much easier.
and what's the but then the question remains, what's the advantage of starting a community as opposed to say joining a community?
Well, you have to find, if you're starting a business, you always have to find a way to position yourself into a market, right? And positioning yourself into a market, if you want to do it in a way that it creates less competition for you, you want to be unique. You want that people relate to your product or your service or yourself in a way that makes you unique. And the same way, so if you're creating a community, create that community around something specific that relates to you, your business, your product, your services that is unique, that is different than other communities out there. So you can create that your own space where people can come together and they almost have nowhere else to go besides that community. And then you have your own set of potential customers right there. And that's the
Whereas
big
if you join the
advantage.
community, whereas if you join the community, you don't have that specific advantage.
Yeah, joining community is also, again, valuable for you as a business owner. But the whole reason of having your own community is owning your own audience, owning your own potential customers, a group of potential ideal customers. So, this is something that has been coming up the last couple of years. Community building for a lot of businesses is becoming hugely important. Even the big corporate businesses start to see the value of a community. And I will go beyond even the fact that it's for generating more revenue for you, or getting new customers, for example. It's also building a community inside the business to retain your own employees, even because having that community sense of community within your business for your employees is also hugely important. But that's a whole other piece of community building. It's safe to say that community building is becoming very, very, very important, because this is where you can differentiate yourself from other businesses, basically. It's
Right, and
like,
it's also a form of social proof. If you have a new potential client in the pipeline, you can say, "Hey, well, listen. In any case, why don't you join the X community?"
yeah.
Oh God, there's an X community.
Hmm.
That's fairly impressive.
That's interesting for a lot of people, yeah, because they can already get in touch with your products or whatever in a way that it doesn't even have to be for free, right? You can already ask a specific, like a small amount. A subscription model is a great idea for a community, a small amount per month, and they've already committed themselves to paying you. So the barrier to buy something else or to buy a higher cost product or service is less. It's much easier for them to do because they already paid you in a way.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And when the skin is in the game, you end up being more proactive by definition.
Yeah, 100%.
Is there an ideal size for a community here? Because I can see that after a certain point it becomes too disparate, but you need a little bit of numbers to have some momentum.
I'm not sure if there's really an ideal size for a community. It really depends on how many people that are actually engaging within the community. You can have a community of 1 million people, but if only 10 people are actually engaging and communicating, then do you really have a good community? So I'd rather have a community of 10 people, and those 10 are actively day in, day out communicating with each other, asking questions, and so on, than a bigger community.
Yeah, I guess there's a bell curve of complexity. I think of cities in these terms. You
Hmm.
know, hamlets, tiny villages are too small in many ways, most ways. They're too small. But then you might well argue that cities like Tokyo are too big, they're too complex.
Yeah,
And at some point, you hit a sweet spot where the size corresponds to a complexity that's attractive, as opposed to a lack of complexity that's unattractive or an over complexity that's unattractive. And with communities, I wonder if something similar functions.
yeah, yeah. The bigger the community gets, it's becoming more and more important to include structures that within that large community you can create some sub communities where people still want to be part of a community, but they also find a place within that community that they can generate more close connections with only a small part of the community, right? And look at it like if we build this community with technology and becomes really big, then at a certain point I'm already thinking, okay, I need to include specific subgroups for specific areas like Europe or the US or Australia and so on. You're still part of technology as a community, right? But since you're more connected to people within your own area, you would rather be connected to those people. But you still want to be also connected to the overall community, because within technology, like the products that we are creating is for everybody, not just for people from Europe or Australia. But the sense of communication between the members can be more specific once we're talking about taxes, for example. Taxes in the US is completely different than in Europe. So if you want to have those kind of engagement, those kind of questions, it doesn't make sense to put that on the overall community. People want to interact with each other where they can give each other some advice specifically for their situation. Especially once you get bigger and bigger and bigger, it makes sense to do that, right? If you do it from the start, it doesn't make sense because there is not enough volume of value of interactions to be had within those smaller communities. So then the value of being in that community is yeah, second to none. It's almost nothing, right? The value isn't there anymore if you split it up too much. So it's finding that balance that is important.
Yeah, and you can again map it onto the bell curve. If you fragment too early, you're losing out on the
Yeah.
potential complexity and richness that lots of people provide. But if you don't do it too late in the game, well, now you're too far down the bell end, and you look more like Tokyo than you do
Yeah.
Glasgow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
What
Yeah.
what platforms do you recommend community building happens best on?
Yeah, the discussion about platforms is an interesting one because you have so many tools, software, platforms out there. I mean, in essence, just starting a Facebook group is already a community. Having it on Facebook, though, is not my preferred choice because you don't really own the audience. You're still subjective to the algorithm to make sure that people within your community get to see whatever you're generating, whatever you're creating. Even the communication or the conversations between people is based on the algorithm if people see this or not. So I don't like that. It's a great platform. A Facebook group is a great platform when it comes to like top of the funnel, just to get people in there, to get them interested in what you do in a free sense. That's what I like about it. But then the next step is really to create your own space somewhere using a paid tool, a paid software that you can craft and create and whatever you want to do within your own community, and that you're 100% sure that everything that you do within the community is being seen by everybody that wants to see it, right? And so Facebook group on one hand I like a lot. On the other hand, you have things like Mighty Networks, which is a platform, a software platform that we are using, and you can craft your own network or your own community on that. And then there's also like uh, popular places these days are things like Discord. Discord is huge, especially in the new Web 3 environment, where a lot of NFT projects are coming up and a lot of people create their own Discord servers for that. Now, this is just a place. Like you can also have, again, Facebook groups, or you have Circle, for example, and you have many, many other platforms to generate those kind of communities. The choice of platform comes down to your strategy. Being strategic with those things is important. Don't just think that, I will just create a Discord server and people will come to this because it's popular now. Or I will create a Facebook group and that's going to be easy to create a community. The platform by itself has little to nothing to do with how you will be able to create a community, small or large. You have to have an idea about what is, again, what will my community be? Why do people want to be there? And if that's on Facebook, on Discord, on Mighty Networks, wherever it is, doesn't really matter. Because the only thing that matters is, do people want to be in there? Do people want to engage with each other in that community?
It's this point comes up in so many forms and different contexts. We get a little bit caught up in the aesthetics, which isn't because the
Mm,
aesthetics aren't important eventually. It's just there's this really superficial thing, which is that we run into the aesthetics. It's what we see, so we go, well, that's the thing that's important. Not realizing that it's kind of at the start, whether it's Facebook or Discord or wherever, is secondary. The point is, as you say, can people genuinely get tangible value from being part of the community? Be that it's people to sell to, be that it's advice, be that it's collaborators. Um, I found communities that I'm part of that work particularly well are ones that have clear methods for pooling resources. So if anyone needs a freelancer that's reliable, you just ask, and someone's got one.
mhm.
Or there's a list, even better, of freelancers, and oh my god, someone's got one. Or hot seating, and these things tend to work so much better than Or rather, these are the important variables as
Yeah.
compared to, as you say.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We forget to mention Slack, for example. A lot of people use Slack as well to build communities.
Mm.
But like you said, it doesn't really matter as long as you provide the right kind of value and that people want to have the urge to come back to your community for a specific reason. If they don't have a reason to come back, you don't have a community, period.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And Slack is attractive. I have to. I mean, I have two thoughts at the same time, but Slack particularly, I omitted to mention it, but I shouldn't have. There's a structure to it that I find attractive. That I find Discord and Facebook can lack.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it also is a platform that I think encourages conversation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a messaging platform effectively. Um, and it has this added bonus of it's kind of for work. People know Slackers.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, like the UX and the user interface is an important one. Making sure that you have the right kind of structure within your community is also important. That's more of the tactical ways to make sure that your community works. Within Facebook groups, you only have so many options to structure your community. Slack has more opportunities to do that, as well as Discord. Mighty
Mm.
Networks has also some of these pieces, but not all of them. Making sure
We've
that people find their way in your community, yeah, will also increase that kind of usability of the community.
yeah, we've spoken about sort of the ORI of these communities, the platforms for the communities. What's the practical way to start filling a community if you're starting today?
The best way that I feel to start building your community is the same way that you try to find new customers for your business is going out there, being proactively connecting with people, talking about what you do, and inviting them. Invite them to your community. And at the first point, like what we do is we get them into the Facebook group first of all. That's a free community, right? That's where we can bring in a lot of people that are somewhat qualified based on the niche that we have, but are not highly qualified in a way that we know that we want to have them as customers. So building a community, first of all, if you want to start right now, I would say build a Facebook group, start reaching out to people, go into other Facebook groups and actively connect with the people that you would like to have in your community. Start there, start those conversations the same way as you would offer your services to somebody that you don't know yet. Create those conversations. And then once you have them in your Facebook group, it's about nurturing, it's about providing value. But then the next step is having some place like Mighty Networks, like Slack, like Discord, where they have to pay to get into. And then in that community, that's your real community, providing even more value, providing even more ways to create an ROI for their business because it's about them, not about you. That's what I would definitely recommend. Look at it as a funnel, top of the funnel, middle of the funnel, bottom of the funnel, and get them through there. The people that eventually will pay to get into your community are actually the people that you want to have as customers. And even if they just pay a little amount per month, they're still a very valuable customer because they actually want to be in there. They gave you their money to be there. So those are the ones that you have to treat tremendously so they can stick around and you can ask really direct questions about what they want. And then you can create products around what they want and sell that for a higher price.
It's also worth saying here, people who add by contributing to a community, asking questions, providing value, are worth their weight in gold, right?
Yeah,
And one of the benefits of the community network effects model is that the addition of another member who's engaging makes the product more valuable for everybody else.
yeah. And if people see that the community is growing and they see how much value some people get out of that community, they will want to be in there as well. They will they will have the FOMO, the fear of missing out if they're not in there. Like, oh my God, so many people are in there and they are talking and they have these kind of successes and the kind of value that you get from that. I want to be in there. So at a certain point, it becomes almost automatic that people will be attracted to your community.
What percentage of community members do you need to be regularly engaged? And say regular engagement is one contribution a week.
If you look at the obvious rule, like 80-20 rule, right?
Mm.
So 20% of the audience will contribute like most of the conversation of the engagement. Let's say that going to 100 people makes sense, because the lower you go in the amount of people, if it's the 80-20 rule, having just two people
Mm.
have conversation with each other isn't really what you want. You want to have those daily conversations going between the people that are in the community. So at least, I would say at least 100 and upwards to that. But again, if you put in the work yourself to create those kind of engagements, conversations, then even below 100 makes sense. It's just about making sure that people that are in there really want to engage, really want to have conversations with each other. It's a tricky question, Jamie. I mean,
Mm.
there's no really hard number that I would go for. As long as you see engagements, as long as you see conversations happening, then you know that you're good. Once that starts to decline, week after week, you have an issue and you have to solve it, not just by adding more people, but by making sure that people want to have those conversations with each other.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, wherever you look at it, the 2080 rule is interesting. Um, because as you say, it doesn't apply equally at every scale. You
Mm.
know, 10 people, two people talking to each other isn't a community. 1,000 people where you have 200 engaged members, that's a community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I guess that's one of the advantages eventually of scaling,
Mm-hmm.
is that you can just afford more passive members without the community being inactive. Whereas at
Yeah.
the start, everyone needs to pull to them more than their relative weight.
Yeah. Yeah. And don't forget that even the people that aren't engaging are still there and are seeing what you're doing. So even the lurkers, like we say, are really valuable in a way, because they might just buy whatever you have, even without having said a word in your community.
It's true, it might be that being engaged is linked to your value on trying to sell, whereas the lurkers may in some way be disproportionately buying. So, they're not trying to post because they're not trying to promote anything, they're
Yeah.
not trying to, but they might be the ones that are providing some of the resources.
Yeah. And having structures in place within your community that also can activate those lurkers, not just by generating conversations, but by generating sales from them is important. So don't forget about them. Even if you think like, okay, these people shouldn't be in here because they're not interacting with anybody or anything, be careful with disregarding them, right?
Um, Stefan, is there anything else we want to share here?
The only other thing that I would add to building the importance of building a community is that at a certain point, you're actually going to create better products based on your community instead of the other way around. You can have right now, you can have a product or a service you want to create a community around, which makes sense, right? But you want to evolve into a situation where the community itself is not so much connected or around the product or the service that you have, but it's more about the community around the brand. So you can easily pivot and you can easily add new products that your community actually wants, instead of trying to force your current things to them. And that's also really important, really valuable. If you can listen to your community and see what they actually want, and you create products around that, well, let me say that the ROI of that will also be very, very, very high. So don't just think to create a community about your product, your services. Create a community around, again, why they want to be there, what makes them connected to each other, and then create products for them.
I think that's a nice summary. I think it's too easy to think that the relationship is your product goes out to the community as opposed to the community through its feedback and the fact that these are your ideal clients ultimately and therefore the best possible source of feedback
Yeah,
help develop the project.
100%. Yeah.
And I think if you look at so many product lifetimes and you look at the development of the products, even things like Kickstarter, right? The idea is effectively this is our idea, guys. So is this interesting? What would it have
Hmm.
to be interesting? What would you have to do to fund it at different stages? It's a very obvious example, demonstration of the same principle.
Yeah.
Stefan, I think that's a great place to stop.
Yeah, absolutely. That was great, Jamie. Thank you.
I've got lots to think about. The problem with doing a podcast around the benefits of community building is you then need to go start one.
Well, that's why we're here within Titanology. We can help with that. So, Jamie, if you need a community, just give us a call.
Brilliant, Stefan. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jamie.